Ladies and gentlemen, welcome along to another episode of EOTT, Everything on the Table with me, Jimmy James. And this evening we're joined by my brother, Neil Sanders. Neil, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. It's a real pleasure to connect, brother. This is a kind of field that I've been researching in quite a bit of depth, especially more so recently, speaking to a few different people on the ground. And for anyone who's not familiar with Neil, I'm sure many of you will be, but for those of you who aren't, Neil has a master's in film production, which included kind of psychology research and film production, and has also authored a series of books. Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, parts 1 and 2, and also more recently the Cambridge Analytica stuff, which we will get into in due course. But Neil, if you'd be kind enough, as is tradition on the podcast, we like to know a little bit about our guests. So could you give us a bit of background, brother, on kind of how you got into this field of research?
Well, as I say, I did psychology at university, and part of it was psychology, and then part of it was getting into media production and stuff like that. And there's a lot of sort of bleed through and crossover. There's a lot of different shots, different colours, and stuff like that evoke certain psychological feelings, and then obviously you can expand that into advertising and this type of thing. And so that sort of trickery and sort of stuff has always sort of interested me. And then when I was learning about psychiatry and psychology and stuff like that, a lot of the sort of the explanations of particularly like hypnosis and the Freudian construction of the brain and all these different things, they were resonating with other things that I was looking at the time, which was basically like the Manchurian Candidate film. And then from that, I got spurred on to read sort of some of the mind control, the sort of declassified documents. And it struck me that, okay, fair enough, some of this is actually plausible. It's not as far-fetched as it might be. And obviously, one thing about what could be considered mind control is it's everything from like truth serums and interrogation techniques to sales and advertising, marketing, propaganda, and then it gets into the sort of really weird stuff, which is, you know, like controlling people's emotions and potentially Manchurian candidates and stuff like that. But I've always been interested in like weird shit. And oh, sorry, can we swear?
Oh, this is no holds barred, brother.
All
So
right, fine, cool,
anything
fine.
goes.
So I've always been interested in sort of anything weird, you know, serial killers, and UFOs, Loch Ness monster, Bigfoot, anything that's a bit off kilter. I was always interested in, and just sort of this seems to be like a perfect fit, really.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, very much like myself. I like to be on the cutting edge, and anything weird and wonderful, I've always been there kind of researching into it. And yeah, like GCSE history, for example, you know, you learned about propaganda and all that kind of stuff. And then it was only kind of later on through the likes of David Icke and things like that, and getting really into the depths of kind of the research and finding out what's going on. And then I spoke to a brother quite recently, Justin Danneman. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Justin's work.
I'm not, but that's just down to my own ignorance.
Yeah, no, there's so much stuff out there, brother. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them, isn't it? But Justin and I were talking about what you just mentioned there, the so-called declassified release CIA documents. And just absolutely fascinating. A lot of it resonated with my own research, and there was more that I didn't know about as well. And you know, the men who stare at goats and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's quite clear to see, you know, the research suggests that this is something it's been going on for a long time, and they've been doing it for decades, and they've got it kind of locked down. I've been thinking about it more recently in the terms, you know, they did like the LSD experiments and all this kind of stuff, and the MK Ultra. But I've been thinking of it more recently with regards to kind of you know, military black projects and Silicon Valley black projects and all this kind of stuff. Now, you probably have heard about the stuff going on in China now with these mind-reading helmets. Have you seen this stuff?
No, I've not actually.
Okay, yeah.
Go on. What's that? Like,
yeah. So yeah, basically
transfers or something.
Well, there's another element I want to get into in a moment, but before we do, yeah, essentially they've got these guys in the factories wearing these helmets. Must be some kind of EEG type of affair. Yeah. And yeah, they're able to monitor the thoughts of the workers.
To what degree? I mean, is it just along the lines of like basically saying like this person's happy, this person's sad, this person's angry?
Yes, essentially it can pick up on kind of rage, depression, and all this kind of stuff. So it was only a Go on.
That's an electroencephalograph, right? Basically, how that works is it goes back to the work of Ross Addy, right? Like basically, the gist of this is that when one of those emotions is produced, it produces a particular wave pattern. In fact, I can show you. I've got love there. That's love tattooed on my shirt.
Ah,
Like
beautiful.
that's the telegraph of how it works, right? Okay, and
Nice.
there's a different wave pattern for each sort of emotion, right? Okay, so if you can get that and put it on the back of a microwave or whatever, you can project that at somebody, and they can. Well, basically, what it does is it sort of like short circuits your brain. So your brain cannot tell that that's not an organic signal, and so basically you'll respond thusly. The chemicals will be released, and if they like, you know, if they shoot love at you, you'll feel very, very happy and euphoric. If they shoot hate at you or depression or anything like that, you'll feel correspondingly. So what they're doing with that helmet sounds to me like it's just it's showing you what pattern is going along, which isn't. I mean, that's creepy as hell, but it's not actually that new, I don't think. Or
No.
well, it might be, but it's a reversal of stuff that was going on in like the sort of 60s and 70s in a sort of more weaponized sense, basically.
Well, I'm glad you've segued lovely there. Thank you very much, Neil, into my next question, which is essentially, I've been speaking to a brother across the pond, Kevin Christian. Are you familiar with Kevin Christian?
I'm not sorry. I'm going to be
No,
really
not at all, not at all. As I said, I understand. I know it is. But I've a bit of time to do some research. I've been speaking with Kevin. Now, he's talking about remote neural monitoring.
Okay.
Now, you watched Black Mirrors?
I've seen a few, yeah.
Did you see the episode with the Black Museum with the doctors wearing the encephalograph helmet? And he's
sorry, I'm going to be.
No, not at all, not at all. I know you're aware of the principles, which is great.
Yeah.
So you don't need to know about the the mainstream material. But essentially, again, it's this kind of he's got some kind of implant, and it's these encephalograph helmets that go onto the patient so that he can experience them in real time. Now, what Kevin has been documenting for quite some time is this phenomena of remote neural monitoring.
Okay.
Now, his narrative is essentially that there is digital infrastructure which allows people to essentially use these headsets and log into neural monitoring. Now, I'm sure you're aware that they say that, like we all have a unique individual fingerprint, we all have a unique resonant frequency. Each human being has a unique resonant frequency, which is kind of your identifier.
Right.
And yeah, what he's saying is essentially that these encephalograph headsets are allowing people to remote neural monitoring. So it's almost like mind melding using this technology. Are you familiar with any of this stuff, or have you heard anybody talking about this stuff?
Well, I mean, I've seen experiments where they've done like what could be called thought transfer, or they've basically, I mean, you see a degree of that in sort of paraplegia and stuff like that. You know, where you can do the sort of mind activated arms and
yes, yeah, I've seen all that. Like yeah.
So it might be that. I mean, when he says neural monitoring, by monitoring, what does it mean? But you're saying that they can mash in and take it
over. Essentially, by using these headsets, they are if they're using a headset, the polarity can be reversed then. So whilst you can use it one way to receive the frequency that's being broadcast from a mind, it can also project the other way. So it's simultaneously reading someone else's unique identifying signature. So if I was wearing a helmet, for example, and I was tuned into you, I would be actually experiencing your mind, your thoughts, and everything that's going on in your head.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And like, you know, Kevin's been documenting this for quite some time now. He seems a very genuine kind of chap, and you know, there's a lot of effort to go to if it's kind of you know, people talk about kind of you know, he's been sectioned a few times and whatnot, but what he's saying actually does stand up to scrutiny when you look into it, and just a fascinating prospect really of the kind of level of things that are going on, like this weaponized algorithmic surveillance going on in the UK.
I mean, that's certainly definitely a thing. I mean, this is the point. You don't necessarily need something as much as that, because people have got so much information out there willingly. Aside from that, you know, people don't quite sort of grasp how much you're followed. For example, if you've got a phone on you, you're constantly being listened to. Every time you use your card, you've probably got a GPS on you. They're monitoring what you're doing, and they're seeing your patterns and stuff like that, and what you're buying, and what you like and what you don't like. And then this is massively compounded by social media, which is basically, you know, is very successful in the last few years, taking us from a state where expressing every facet of your life was not a normal thing to do. It wasn't really, you know, nobody was that interested in, frankly, in what everyone had got
Yeah,
to say. Now, for
exactly.
some reason, everyone thinks that like everything is like, it's bizarre. It's almost turned life into your own little reality TV show. And so people are sort of desperate to get all this information out there and to like get followers and likes and to get validation through the medium, and to sort of make themselves feel valuable by a response, or by getting you know, by getting people to tell them that they're valuable, basically, which is fine in some senses, but you know, like all of these things, it can be exploited, and when that the reason is that basically you get a dopamine response. You know, it's very nice. It's people laugh at your jokes. People basically go, "Oh, you're clever," or whatever. "Oh, I'm not thought of it like that." Of course, it makes you feel brilliant, and it actually gives you a dopamine response. This is probably why a lot of people do certain things, because they like to get that response and like to have that feeling of a degree of authority, or a feeling that perhaps you're special in a certain reason. Is perfectly normal. This is why people do most things in their life, to be quite honest. But again, it's when people can tap into that, and they can use it for their own ends. And this is a real big problem at the minute, because we give out so much data. We tell everybody when we're there, we tell everybody what clubs we're going to, we tell everyone what pub we've just eaten, we show everybody what food we're having. I'll put it this way, okay? If I had to, my job was to scare you, okay? I don't know anything about you, right? Okay, it's going to be bloody difficult, right? Okay, it's going to be a lot more simple and easy for me to manipulate you if I know that you're frightened of spiders. What happens if I know that you're frightened of spiders and you don't like the dark, and also you don't like enclosed spaces or something like that? Well, all of a sudden I'm putting you in an enclosed dark space with a load of spiders, right? The solution was staring me in the face, because I know all these things about you. And you're having companies like i316, Cambridge Analytica, and SCL and stuff like that, which are mining your data. You're also connected to things like Palantir, and these are again, they're monitoring companies. They're intimately connected with the intelligence agencies, and they're there to basically to track you. And you've got facial recognition technology, which is also being tied into CCTV monitoring that's going all over the place, particularly some of it's out in the open in China. But basically, we've got a system called Trapwire that run all through America. And the reason they're using these things is, well, it's two ways. One is manipulation, right? Okay, if I can make you frightened, or I can make you angry, or I can make you happy in a particular way, I can drive you in a particular way, and you can like know that this guy's a good guy and this guy's a bad guy, and blah blah blah, rubbish, whatever. It's manipulation, okay, mass mind control, if you like. The other way is basically for pre-crime, which is mental. It is
Yeah.
absolutely mental. But the concept of all of this monitoring is, it's mental in one, like, the thing is, right, okay, if you're sending stuff on Facebook saying, right, tomorrow we'll blow up the blah, 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 okay, fair enough. You could understand how that would be a pre-crime detector, but it's not that, okay? These are talking about algorithmic AI determinations that this person's not acting in the way that they normally act. And we know how they normally act because we monitor them so bloody much. We've got their walk. There's seriously a thing where basically they'll monitor the way that people are walking and use the facial recognition technology and go, oh, that person looks nervous, train CCTV on them. And there's an element of sense to it, obviously, because, you know, there's got to be an element of sense, but that is so incredibly intrusive and dangerous and controlling, and that's the real worry about information sharing and data mining. That, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even if you're going into incognito mode and stuff like that, you really think that people like this. This is the other thing as well, because people think, well, there are banks of people there just watching what I'm doing online and monitoring me. To an extent, yes, but there's also a huge amount of artificial intelligence that's collating this massive amounts of data. I mean, Cambridge Analytica, for example, said that they had over 5,000 data points on over 230 American people, and they utilised this. That's the entire voting population of America. and they utilize that to basically micro-target them, find out what makes them angry, find out what makes them sad, find out basically what makes them tick. What would be a really, really personalized advert that would basically resonate with this person in such a way that they believe it and they go along with it. And when they have that amount of data, they can cater it to you. And because again, we're all on social media and stuff like that, we don't know who the hell we're speaking to. Everyone's behind an avatar and stuff like that. They can flood you with sock puppet accounts. And this is what they're doing, and bots and stuff like this that go along and with a certain trope or whatever. And it's very, very dangerous because basically, as we sort of briefly discussed, you get dopamine response when you're getting all these interactions on social media. It's designed like that. It's like that's not me. That's Chamath Palihapitiya and Sean Parker, who are the people basically who are behind the creation of this mechanism. And they designed it specifically like that. It's supposed to be like an addictive game.
Yes, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. It's yeah, very much so. I was watching Gabor Mate the other day discussing, you know, the Silicon Valley bigwigs and the fact that their children don't even see technology. The nannies are not even allowed to take their phones into the house. That just tells you everything you need to know, right? And then you get into
Absolutely.
I'm about 3 or 4 months now phone free. I had to give up the phone because it was just insidious, so addictive. And as you say, when you understand how the brain works, the dopamine receptors, it all makes complete sense, and you can see it for what it is. Very, very nefarious. And as you say, we're already pretty much kind of at a kind of crossroads, I think. I can remember back, I don't want to say exactly when, maybe, what we now, 2019, a good 5-6 years ago it must have been. I was talking about something random like getting a terrapin aquarium coffee table, and then just conversationally, and then jump on the phone, pops up terrapin aquariums, and I'm like, hang on a minute. And I was telling my friends, and they were like, all right, Jim, yeah. And I'm like, no, seriously, guys, I have not even touched anything on my phone. I was literally just talking, and then I was like, aha, okay, so it's already become. Now it's blatant, you know, you see it all the time.
I mean you get the adverts on you know, Facebook and whatever site you're on scrolling that are basically catered to what you've either your you know, your history or but yeah, no, they listen to you through microphones. And
I think it's thank you, brother.
About it at all.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're exactly right. Yeah, and I think the way I look at it is, I'm pretty sure that every single keystroke, every single recording, especially for the time that you've owned a smart device or a smart TV, I think is all there on a database somewhere, or it's all, you know, in a cloud on. And then we can get into the even more nefarious kind of prospects then of retrospective action based on that hoarded materials, which again is, you know, quite a daunting prospect. So tell me then, Neil, you obviously, you know, you're quite sought after with regards to interviews, and how much contact have you had with people who are now campaigning with regards to being targeted individuals and all this kind of stuff? Is that something I feel that you've ventured into?
Not. It's not really for me to do because I'm not in any way qualified to help these people. So if somebody approaches me like that, I always basically put them in contact with AACT, I believe it is, which is an organisation that is the only organisation that I know of that helps people with that particular problem. So yeah, that's the thing. It's not for me, and I'm in no way qualified to help people. The first thing I would always tell people is you know, yeah, just make sure that there's nothing else as well, that it's not like a health problem or something.
Of course, yeah.
You've got to be sensible. But if you've checked these avenues and you're pretty sure or whatever, yeah, I'd send them to that particular organisation. Just because
yeah, awesome. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And it's, yeah, I respect what you're saying there about not being kind of qualified. But through your research, regards to, for example, voice to skull technology, something quite viable in your?
Oh, it's totally viable. Yeah, I mean, it's not just viable; it's been used. I mean, voice to skull technology. Like, there's numerous applications of it that have been used. And I sort of think about something like, well, the first time that they did it was basically during the Second World War. They found that people standing next to radio, or microwaves and radio installations, they would either hear knocking, like a sort of weird knocking sound that wasn't audible over here. Or sometimes they would hear conversations that were seemingly out of the air, basically. And they basically looked at this and they found that you're able to sort of point voices on microwaves and various other types of waves, and you can send them directly at people. That sort of knocking thing was called the Frey auditory effect, and then Alan Frey was able to manipulate that in order to transfer words and sentences, and so it is essentially voice to skull. And I believe that was something like in the 50s. I may be wrong on that, but it was very, very early. And then since then, there's all sorts. I mean, it's not just America and the UK. There's China. We're looking at certain mind control techniques, although that's very, very hidden. And Russia were as well. They had it was the Smirnov pattern was essentially what it was called, and it was slightly different. It used audio waves, but it set them up in such a way that you put something like the sound of an engine in the foreground, so to speak, and then you put a message in the background. And Igor Smirnov was the inventor of this, and they know that it works because basically what they wanted to do is they wanted to use it in Waco when David Koresh was refusing to leave the compounds of the French civilians in Mount Carmel. The FBI suggested bringing this machine, and they actually brought it down, and they got Charlton Heston to record dialogue, pretending to be God, because obviously, he's known for his oratory, and he was going to tell David Koresh, "Go on, give it up, David. It's all cool. Just come outside and we'll be fine." They chose not to do that because apparently Igor Smirnov says that there's a 40% chance that it will totally backfire. They'll go completely insane and end up like slitting each other's throats, and so they decided not to go with that one. But even more sort of recently than that, Raytheon, which is a weapons manufacturer, it was using synthetic telepathy as a potential. What's the word? It's like it was for prison use. It was going to be used to sort of calm down prisoners. I don't know exactly how.
I know exactly what you mean, though. Yeah.
But, they tested it, and they were going to sort of roll it out. Whether they did or not, I don't know. Well, they've certainly not announced that they were. But yeah, so voice to skull technology. That's the problem about it. It is a real thing, and there's documented examples of it being used, and various different sort of methodologies that could be used to do that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a tricky one, that is.
It is, and I'm sure the term the incredulity bias, where people come across this voice to skull technology on its own as a kind of isolated kind of subject or idea. Yeah, it sounds very outlandish, but you only have to do a cursory bit of research, as you say, to see all these documented examples of it throughout history.
There's also these slightly easier versions that people might be able to sort of get more on board with. Is you can put a microphone in somebody's tooth. Like Andrija Puharic invented that ages ago. What was her name? The Lucille Ball. I'm sure it was her. The one from I Love Lucy.
Right.
She picked up a Japanese. This is during the Second World War. This is true. That's absolutely true. She swore blind that she was picking up radio signals through her teeth. And it transpired that she was. She figured out. She said, look, she went to wherever, I forget, and said, look, there's these Japanese people, they're at this address and blah blah blah, and they're saying there, and apparently people burst in the door, and it was a spy ring, like a wartime Japanese spy ring in America. But there was a suggestion that perhaps that I don't know, that they'd use this perhaps as a conduit or whatever. I think there's a famous baseball player that claimed he'd be hearing messages through his teeth as well. But that's like a real thing. Or you can just basically put one inside the head, like at the base of the skull. Apparently, or you can put it very, very sort of inside the bone, and it sort of it works as like an acoustic.
A transducer, right?
Yeah. But it almost works like a sort of acoustic guitar or whatever, like it resonates or whatever. So, and again, they have tried that sort of stuff in the past as well. So that's rather crude. Like I'm pretty sure that they've got far more sophisticated things that they can do now.
Yeah, it's funny you say crew, because I met a guy when I was sectioned, and he said, I've got a chip in my tooth. I was like, oh, okay. He went, yeah, I've got a chip in my tooth, and they use it to talk to me and all this kind of stuff. He said they did it in a certain prison back in 1985 or something like that, in the 80s. And obviously I was in a mental institution at the time, so I was like, all right, take it with a pinch of salt. But then, you know, subsequent research and whatnot, very, very viable.
Well, it's certainly, it's certainly possible. I mean, you obviously can't speak to that specific example.
Yeah.
Don't know. But has that ever been done? Yeah, that's been done. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this is it. And I think the more that's coming out now, we kind of see, you know, all these agendas and things like that. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's been going on for quite some time that's only now coming to light, and all the rest of it. It's just, I think there's a lot more going on than people tend to realise. And I think I would like to segue there, if we may, into your Cambridge Analytica book. How did that come about, and kind of what was the inspiration for you to get on with that?
Well, I mean, basically, ages and ages and ages ago, I found out about Cambridge. Well, just shortly after Trump got elected, basically, I found out about Cambridge Analytica. And the long and short of it is, as we spoke about earlier, it's a data mining company, and what it boasts about being able to do is change the outcome of elections, or dictate the outcome of elections. And I thought, hang on, that's a bit cagey, isn't it? And it's a psyops company. It was born out of a company called SCL, or I forget exactly what that stands for off the top of my head. I've drawn a blank. But anyway,
in the description box.
But yeah, so these are psyops firms, and they're connected to British military and Marconi defence and British psychological warfare arms and stuff like that. So I'm thinking, that's very, very odd. And then essentially I found out what they did was they stole everybody's data in the UK during the Brexit campaign. They hid it in Canada at a company called Aggregate IQ, and they used this data to apply their algorithms and their psychological warfare method on it in order to promote a leave vote type strategy. And it was hired by leave.eu, vote leave, and then later by the Trump campaign. And the reason it was connected to all of these is due to a bloke called Robert Mercer. Robert Mercer is friends with Steve Bannon, friends with Nigel Farage. He's a hedge fund manager, and he was one of the main financiers of the Trump campaign. And he's connected to this think tank called the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is this far-right Christian evangelical big business house that basically hates absolutely everybody who's not rich, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, basically. They don't like foreigners, don't really care for people of colour. They certainly don't like gay people. They're not massively keen on women unless they know, unless they shut up. They hate immigration. They hate environmental reforms. They hate workers' rights and all this blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're sort of skipping ahead. So Cambridge Analytica was used and was vital in spreading lies, essentially, to which won the Leave vote, and it won the election of Trump. And a lot of this was done through a company called Gatestone Media. And Gatestone Media is basically financed by the Koch brothers and the DeVos family. And so these are all these billionaires and stuff behind the Leave and behind Trump. And that twigged me. I was like, hang on, because I was bloody convinced and told by everybody in the know that this is anti-establishment. Okay, what we're doing by leaving the EU is anti-establishment. What we're doing by putting Trump in is anti-establishment. I was like, I don't think that's true because of all of these military-industrial connections and billionaires and think tanks and business conglomerates that are connected to both of these instances. And then the total kicker for me was when I found out completely by accident that Cambridge Analytica and SCL, it's got a List X clearance. And a List X clearance is, it means that it can have top secret UK files. It can hold it, which means it's an extension of the intelligence agencies, right? The other thing is it's considered a weapon.
So is that third-party clearance at the highest levels, then, essentially, with regards to data and information?
No, it's more than that. Basically, it's under export control by the British government. which means that the British government and elements of the intelligence agency have to sign off every single time that it's used. And bearing in mind that it was used on the Leave campaign to get Donald Trump elected, that means that the British intelligence and the British government wanted the Leave campaign to win, and they wanted Trump to be elected. And it's as simple as this. I don't trust the British government or the British intelligence agencies.
That's a good stance. I take the same one.
So both of those things were clearly a very bad idea. There might have been good reasons that you thought would be enacted or whatever. But again, I don't trust these people. And if that's what they want to happen, I don't see that it's ever going to be a very good idea for that to happen. And furthermore, basically through Cambridge Analytica, they've basically overthrown governments all over Africa and basically made the oil-rich areas and the mineral-rich areas. But they're also behind the promotion of, and we know this because they're utilising their media arms to promote this. They're also using alternative media. Red Ice Radio is owned by the Regeneries. Dave Rubin is Koch brothers. Breitbart is financed by the Koch brothers and by the Mercers. Milo Yiannopoulos was financed by the Mercers. Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, they're all financed by the Koch brothers. Ben Shapiro is financed by the Wilkes brothers, and all of these people just so happen to be Heritage Foundation. Right, so every one of those people, they're shills. Furthermore, the Heritage Foundation, which is this big business think tank, is financed by the Moonies, the Unification Church of Sun Myung Moon. The Unification Church of Sun Myung Moon, which is the Moonies, was set up by the CIA. That's not even disputed, right? It's run by the CIA. It's the CIA mind control that basically is utilised along with the KCIA in South Korea to spread influence in that part of the world. It's not even denied. They're financing the Heritage Foundation, which means that the Heritage Foundation is CIA. So basically, this whole thing is CIA and MI5 at the other end. And what are they doing? They're backing Trump, and they're backing, to an extent, Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson or Daniel Hannan or any of these people, because they're connected to the IEA and the IFT, which are British think tanks, which are also financed by the Heritage Foundation. And what do? They want to privatise all of English industry. Not that there's much left, there's basically the NHS and a few other things. But that's what they want to do. And it's a continuation of the policy that came from the Heritage Foundation in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. How are they achieving this? As well as basically spreading shit through all of these stupid, like, alternative media that about 2015 all went completely right-wing. Like Red Ice, which is financed by the Charles Martel Society and William Regenery. Richard Spencer suddenly came on the scene. He's financed by Charles Martel Society, MPI, and William Regenery. And then everybody else is sponsored by either the Koch brothers or the Mercer family. These are the elites, okay? And they're the ones that are telling you about the deep state and all this. They back Viktor Orban, and they back Salvini, and they back Geert Wilders, and they back Alice Waddell, and they back both of the Pens, and they back the guy in Czechoslovakia who's right-wing, and the guy in Ukraine who's the right-wing, and all of these people. And basically what they are, they're all right-wing or even far right-wing candidates that are in on this concept of popularism. And it's nonsense, because they're all spreading exactly the same message, using exactly the same media arm, because they're financed by exactly the same people. And it's all lies. I'll give you an example. What is the thing that got Donald Trump in? 3 phrases or 4 phrases really: drain the swamp, build the wall, lock her up, and the other one, which I can't bloody well remember off the top of my head. Anyway, the point is, he didn't come up with any of those. Cambridge Analytica came up with those in 2014. That's not, it's a marketing campaign. All of this is a marketing campaign. And that's what, and it's for the benefit of these incredibly wealthy people. So, like, for example, with the EU, we've, for the last however many years, quite sensibly been very, very wary of consolidation and socialisation of power in the EU. Okay, so what Cambridge Analytica did was basically they preyed on that, mostly through lies, and they got people ultimately paranoid and got them to vote Leave. What's going to come of that, basically? Rather than being in a union rather than being in a union with 28 people, you've got, as I say, Italy and France and Germany with Waddell and England and Bolsonaro in Brazil and whoever the guy's name is in Argentina, and they're attempting a coup in Venezuela, and all of the African nations, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all doing exactly the same thing. So this achieves exactly the same thing. Rather than all being in one union, basically, you've got 30 odd people all over the world that are identical and bizarrely use this concept of nationalism, right? When has Nigel Farage ever said anything that's positive about Britain, or said, you know why Britain's great? Because this. What he always says is, you know why Britain's not great? Because brown people, because this, because the EU, right? It's a jingoistic, like, fear-based rhetoric that never tells you about good things. It just gives, because you know why? I'll tell you for why. They never describe what England is, okay? They never describe, they just tell you what's being taken away from you, or how this imagined thing might be taken away from you. And the reason they don't tell you what it is because if they say, England is this and this and this and this and this, you might go, I don't like that, I like this. So that's the whole point. He's got to have an element of intangible mythicism about it that is never fully tied down or explained, but that allows people to put their own meaning to it. And when you, this is why the minute you get in America First and people like that, Turning Point UK, which USA, which is Koch brothers, arguing. You've got Tommy Loren arguing with Candace Owens, and you've got Milo Yiannopoulos arguing with Richard Spencer, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because they're all pulled together by this swirling thing above them. And they're all terrible, horrible grifters. All of them, idiots, to a man. Like, all of them, just terrible, terrible shit people. And they're being cast aside now. And so they're showing that they're drap, because essentially they were lied to as well. I mean, I don't have any sympathy for them, but basically they were utilised, because you cast your net as wide as you can, and you're getting as much shit as you basically can back. And while somebody might not be like someone like a Gavin McInnes might not appeal to this particular person, but a Milo Yiannopoulos might do, or a Ben Shapiro might do. And although they've got different sort of opinions, essentially they're driving towards the same stupid waterfall, which is essentially right-wing conservatism, for the aid of massive corporate interests.
Yes, thank you, brother. I would say we're democracy is more of a corporatocracy masquerading as a democracy, and
yes, it can be.
Yeah,
let it allow it to be.
Well, yeah, this is it. I kind of got into, found out all about the birth certificate stuff, and the fact that the UK is a corporation and all the rest of it. And you get into all that, and it's just, they've got it locked down quite nicely. They've been doing a good job. But as I say, in the age of information, ignorance is a choice.
To run a civilization, there's a lot of people, dude. So basically, they've got to have all these systems of control there, in order to keep people busy, or keep people bogged down, or keep people feeling that they don't have the potential to make a difference, because then they just sort of get on with it, basically.
Yeah, this is it. And as I said, it's in the age of information, ignorance is a choice, but also in the age of information, it's hard to hide things. And when you do a bit of research, you see all the links, you see all the connections, and it just shows itself.
Well, I mean, that's the sort of new thing, really, is because, as you quite right to say, everyone's probably got a computer in their pocket. Like, any information is there if you know how to research and how to wade through the shit. And the counter to that they've done is they've flooded there's too much information at the minute. There's far too much. And bizarrely, having a lot of information, it rather than basically that you would assume you've got all this information that you'd go, oh, brilliant, I'll check it all and see see which is the most plausible. It's not how people work. People go for the first thing that they hear that resonates with the stuff that they've previously heard. And it's very, very difficult to get people to check or to change their opinion. And we're in an age of information warfare. at the minute, because basically that's the new mind control, convincing you that this is true, or convincing you that that's true, and having a plausible string behind it so that you believe it, if you know what I mean. Oh, I know it's true because this is peer reviewed, or this is blah blah blah, or this comes from this person who I have previously seen as trustworthy, or whatever. And it's getting very, 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 very clever.
It is. Thank you, brother. And that brings us nicely on to what I wanted to discuss next, which, you know, excuse me, I was watching one of your videos earlier, and high praise indeed. Some people are calling you a shill in the comments, and it's always good. We know you're on the target there, and I'll tell you the reason why. It was because you were talking about the whole Pizzagate thing.
Oh, that one, yes.
Yeah. So we'll get into that. I'll give you my perspective on it, if I may. So I've done 7 years in prison for drug offences. Whilst I was in prison, in Park Prison, there as a sex offenders unit, and some serious kind of, you know, naughty people there. And I was a listener with the Samaritans, and that was the only part of the jail where we mixed for an hour. We'd go for the training, and, you know, the expectation was that you were mature enough to be able to be there, and, you know, not make. Some people would come in and go, I'm not fucking sitting with these wrong, and they'd have to go. But, you know, the idea is, you know, whatever. And I'd be looking at these guys, and a couple of them would look like, you know, dodgy characters, someone you definitely wouldn't want looking after your kid. But a couple of them you wouldn't even pick out of a lineup. And this kind of intrigued me to the point that, you know, this kind of stuff, it can be anyone. And then kind of later on then, Ian Watkins, the lead singer of the Lost Prophets, came in, right? So he was there in the same prison as me, right? Now then, I know it's a horrible subject to get into, but, you know, it is what it is. And this guy was, you know, attempted rape of a baby, and we can assume that, you know, that's been going on before. And that just boggled my mind. So when I came out there, and I had access to the internet, and I could do a lot more research. Now, are you familiar with the Hampstead case in the UK?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll circle back around to that. But so when I saw the WikiLeaks emails, so we'll take that first. I'm reading through these emails, and there's all this code and stuff. Now, something that you brought up in the video, which is new to me, and
well, the codes weren't in the. Now, here's the thing.
That's exactly what I'm about to mention. That's exactly what I'm about to mention. I've got it up on my screen. Now, being convicted myself of drug offences, the forensic analysis team, you know, we're talking in code via text and stuff. They blew that out of the water, right? Because they're very basic codes. So having personal experience of that kind of subject, we're looking then at what I've got it up in front of me, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Intelligence Bulletin. What you said was that's not from the FBI, that's from the WikiLeaks.
It's never been on. It's purported in the WikiLeaks. It said it's an FBI document, but that's it. There's no FBI source. It's not on the FBI website, and I can't find the case. And I looked for it because I was fascinated by it. So I don't know that if someone could show me the original case, which must have been probably in the 90s, where they used that symbol and that symbol became a sign. Please show me. That'd be cool.
Well, this is it, and I saw it, and I must admit I took it at face value. Laziness on my part, I'll have to admit.
No, it's not. No, it's not at all. Right? Because that's entirely the point. It was presented to you as an FBI document, which is credible, okay? But that's entirely what I'm saying. It's okay, it's an FBI document. You look at it and go, it could be. Where did it come from?
Well, this is it. Well, there's a phone number on there, which I found. Because I read through it again, and I thought, well, have a little look and see what's what, because I hadn't even considered that, really. As I said, I just took it at face value as part of the ongoing kind of, because there was so much to get into with regards to kind of researching into it. But there's a phone number on there, so I'm going to have to ask one of my listeners across the pond to give it a ring. I might even try and give it a ring myself, to see if the number is legitimate, and if these files, if this document and all this stuff does stand up to scrutiny, and if it is legitimate. The reason I say that is because my research as a totality, they were far more than just the FBI document, the Voodoo Donut stuff. It's just, there's just so much in it. Okay, so you think that's all hocus pocus as well, do you? Yeah,
personally, I haven't seen. What's the strongest bit of evidence from that? Just isolated, not with this and put it to that and put it to that and put it to that. What's the strongest isolated piece of evidence that anything happened there? Who was the victim?
And who's the victim? Are you referring to?
Yeah, what was the crime? What crime happened there?
Well, my research was that you had the voodoo donut stuff, and then a fella called Vegan Mikey, his testimony where he was talking about, people have, you know, cast aspersions upon him subsequently. Regardless, when I was listening to
that wouldn't be what I would do. What I would do is go, that's a very interesting story. That's not evidence. That's a lead. Provide evidence, back it up.
Yeah, of course. I'm just explaining that.
Yeah,
he was just explaining that he'd moved to this area, and the fact that he was in a band, he was hanging around with these guys, then made a new social circle, and then there was this narrative where he was saying the stuff that he stumbled upon, house party. This is witness testimony, so I can only take the guy on face value.
Yeah,
and then this is all I'm saying, and exactly, and I had all these different threads that come together, but then, you know, you do have to question everything. Yeah, and again, you know, the stuff with the emails, the symbology you were talking about in terms of why would they be so stupid to use something so blatant. I didn't look at it like that. I looked at it as in, they're rubbing our faces in it. Like,
who is?
The people who are doing it.
Who are the people who are doing it?
Well, we know that there are...
You see how No.
Okay.
Again, like, this is the point. This is where it becomes assumptive. We know that paedophilia exists. We know that there are international children's smuggling rings. We know that there's been elements where elites have used children either for blackmail purposes or for pleasure purposes.
Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't mean that everything that does it is connected to that. And you can't say because this exists that is a possibility in that sense. What you need to do is you need to have a distinct line of evidence. And for example, with Pizzagate, everyone said, oh, there's a child trafficking ring because of this, and because of this, and because of this. And it's like, okay, who was the victim? If we're talking about a crime, who was the victim? How many victims were there? When did it happen? What happened? How do we know it happened? And do you know what the answer is to every single one of those in both the Pizzagate and the Voodoo Dolls is fuck all, sweet fuck all, right? Because we don't know, because it's all assumptive. It started on the back of this means this, which means they're paedophiles. So now look for evidence that backs up that concept. And that is backwards. That is not how you do research. And I understand why, because I think that the Pizzagate was part of Cambridge Analytica. It came out, and it was Jared Wyand that blatantly made up. He's a far-right Nazi, by the way. He blatantly made up that code because the code doesn't work. That's the most important point. The strongest bit of evidence that you're putting forward isn't a bit of evidence. It really doesn't actually back anything up. And if anybody thinks that, oh, Neil's covering up for Pizzagate, don't be a twat. Read okay. I was the one that told you about Robert Mercer in 2011, okay? I was the one that told you about Johnny Gosh in 2011, right? I know about these things, and that is exactly and precisely why you need to be really careful with this. Because if you do stuff that was blatantly a 4chan hoax, basically just to smear Hillary Clinton in a really, really childish and silly juvenile way, then it nullifies all the other investigations and it dilutes the good work that you're doing elsewhere, okay? And that's my point, all right? If there's any evidence on it, brilliant, I'll jump on it. But there's no evidence. There's just no evidence other than this means this, and so we can assume that it's this because we know about X. And it's like, you don't really know about that in the first place. It's just not how it works. You need solid evidence or corroboration. That's what you need. Okay, what you've got there, as I said, like with all of these things, you've got a very interesting story that might provide a lead. It's not evidence. And off the back of that, you need to go and look for evidence. And if there is evidence, then you start to examine it. For example, the story was that in the Dunblane massacre that the children were connected to paedophilia or whatever. And this came from a nurse that had apparently blah, blah, blah. That's a lead. Then go out and find evidence. And then you find out that Thomas Hamilton did have child sex offences, and he did somehow get his guns back, and he was connected to this person. And that starts to build a picture, okay? It's still not whole, but that's how you would do things like that. Or with Paul Benassi, he made a statement, okay, that they were involved in Micron and children smuggling, Bohemian Grove and all of this sort of stuff. That's an interesting story. Has he got anything to back it up? Yeah, he has. He's got evidence that was shown in a court of law that proved that Lawrence King, a Republican at the time, was sexually abusing and torturing him and using him for blackmail purposes. Evidence was concocted. And again, I'm not stupid. I do appreciate that this is the point of criminal activities, that you hide the evidence. But it's very, very easy to get caught up in the excitement of the investigation, because you're uncovering things and you're doing a good job, and it's admirable. But you've also got to be careful, because basically these people's fucking lives, right? Some twat walked into that pizza shop, right, with a fucking machine gun. He could have killed people. He was looking for the basement, and do you know what he found? There is no bloody basement. Like, every single aspect of that story just collapses. The only thing that holds up any angle of that story is the other component pieces. You pull one of them away, it's just boom. And that's why I don't believe in Pizzagate.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And with regards to Pizzagate, as I say, I don't know anything for certain, not at all.
No.
When you say, show me some evidence, I don't have any evidence to show you, I'm afraid. But for my own research, I was into stuff way before the kind of Pizzagate stuff come out. And then it is, I must say, it is pulling different threads together. And granted, there isn't any solid evidence. So, for example, the Marc Dutroux case in Belgium.
There's lots of solid evidence of the Marc Dutroux case in Belgium. There's actual physical evidence, including the bloody room where the girls were kept, and photographs of the girls. So that's why that one went ahead, because there's evidence. There's evidence of him paying off and being connected to the police. There is evidence of that. Okay? Yeah. That's why that is a solid case.
Yeah.
So to say that there's no evidence, I would disagree with you there, dude.
I didn't say there wasn't any evidence.
Oh, I do apologise.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I was just making the point that essentially that was a proven case with evidence that showed a paedophile ring right up to the top echelons of government, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we know that went on. Then we get into the whole Jimmy Savile arena and all that kind of stuff. You know, again, evidence, there's witness testimonies and all this kind of stuff.
Well, again, there's lots of evidence that he committed the crimes. There's lots of circumstantial evidence that certainly Thatcher knew about it, must have known about it due to the vetting. Certainly the royal family must have known about it due to the vetting, and he was still uncomfortably close. Whether you can take it to the degree that was he providing kids or was or anything.
No, you can't. You can't. At this point, I can't anyway.
No. But and again, that's the important distinction, because we know up to a point it's perfectly possible, perfectly. Yeah.
And that is my stance, brother. Just to clarify, that is my stance. That from my research and from what I guess, I think Pizzagate, there's lots of different things in there, I think, which were used to discredit it or to kind of shine a light away from it. But I think it's fair to assume, like, I've been following my brother Sean Atwood, and he's got a connection with an American guy, essentially. Forgive me, I forget his name. Recaro was a senior detective, or even might have been higher up than that, was given a lot of video evidence from who's the most recent guy? Epstein.
Oh, yeah.
Lots and lots of disgusting, depraved video evidence. And he said, listen, this is important. I'm going to give it to you, because he was known to be a whistleblower and whatnot. Yeah. Recaro's now dead. He died of supposedly a heart attack. Right? Okay, whatever. And this Russian guy is now this American guy now is I forget his name, sorry. But he's in Russia now. And apparently somebody went out there to verify what he had on the hard drive. And, they couldn't even look at much of it, because you can imagine what was on there.
Yeah, it is.
And again, it just comes to pulling all threads together. It's all very suggestive. And I like your stance in that unless you've got evidence, you can't really, and as I said, I don't purport to say, oh, this is definitely what's going on. And it was the Hampstead case. The Hampstead case for me, I watched those videos with those kids. Now, again, to my mind, I don't have any proof. It just didn't seem to be that they were making it up. Again, that's just opinion. That's just my opinion. But there was more stuff that went on afterwards. The analysis of the police interview videos, the fact that the activists who were trying to shine a light on it, one of them's doing like 9 years now for a breach of a restraining order. And
if we're talking about what's her name, she harassed a woman very seriously. She deserved to go to prison.
Okay, well, you know, that's
Sabine.
Sabine McNeil, yeah.
She what she did was appalling. Like,
okay, well, I'm not familiar with that.
Doing these things.
Yeah, again, I'm not familiar with that, so I have to just remain open to everything. At the end of the day, I love what you said. I wrote it down. At the end of the day, you know, I may well be wrong, and I'm not immovable on any subject whatsoever. You know? And this is it, and that's my stance on things. I kind of get a feel for what's going on, and it is one of those, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You've just got to be very, very careful, and the hamster thing is one, because basically, as you say, personally, I fall on the side of I don't buy it for a second. Again, it's one. It right from the start, I thought it was something iffy. If fuck it, I'll tell people. Yeah, the parents, you know, the parents who apparently were so concerned, the weed smoking parents that were so concerned, they emailed me asking me to do a rap song with them to get the plight of their kids, like. So I wrote back to them. I said,
"That's random.
You're liars. You're liars. This is all about you trying to basically like demonize your ex-husband." And they never responded, which leads me to believe that they're full of shit. Like, if my kids were in part of a satanic thing, I wouldn't be emailing a very minor person within this thing myself and saying, "Let's do a weed-based rap song, and that will bring attention back to our kids." These people are after attention. Like, no, I didn't.
I don't know anything for sure, brother. I can't say anything for sure, but you know, I've kind of seen different things that lead me to think that there's more to it. It definitely, at the very least, deserves a full investigation, any more than what occurred.
Very possible. This is
on both sides as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I wouldn't be opposed to that at all. What I would be opposed to, is doxing people and running up to people in the street and accusing them of shit and getting in front of church services and stuff. Because again, you know what it does? It discredits everything. It totally discredits everything. There's ways and means to go about things, and sometimes, obviously, you need to be more proactive because you're searching for stuff, but you've also got to always think, what if I'm wrong? What if I am wrong? Because this is a human being, right? And I could fuck up their life immeasurably because of some misunderstanding that in a few years' time, I'll look back and go, I was wrong about that, never mind, get on with my day. That person's had to move, right? Because you've put pictures of them and told everyone that they murdered children. Like, you've got to be very, very careful with that sort of stuff. Imagine if it had happened to you, right?
Of course, yeah.
It'd be horrific. And so you just need to be very, very careful with that sort of stuff, dude. Not you, you know. The royal you. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
So yeah, it is very, very tricky, and I get it because people think that they're doing the right thing and they think that they're saving people and stuff like that, but it's easy to get swept up in that stuff, and you just need to be aware that there are human beings out there that are affected by this sort of stuff. And look at like InfoWars and stuff like that, when they're putting out the picture of that kid and saying this is the shooter from Parkland, and it transpired it wasn't the shooter at all, right? That guy could have got killed, right? Like rabid followers. Like, I mean, it was all bloody InfoWars as well that sent that guy to Pizzagate as well. He shot in the ceiling. How did he not know there wasn't somebody like in the room above and stuff like that? Like, people could have got killed over something stupid, really, really silly and stupid. And then you've got however many lives ruined because basically on the internet it seems really, really cool and blah, 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 blah. But in real life, it's just, you know, people are affected by it. I'm not saying don't investigate. Good God, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that basically just be a bit careful for your own sake other than anything else, right? Because again, there's other people as well that have gone head on for these things. Wolfgang Hagberg, right? Okay, do you know what happened to him? He's the guy behind Nobody Died on Sandy Hook.
No, I'm not too familiar. I know the overall premise of Sandy Hook with Alex Jones, but I'm not. I don't have any in-depth knowledge.
He's an elderly guy, right? Okay, he probably didn't have any bad intentions. He probably thinks that he's looking for something new. He's going to be universally hated for the rest of his life, and he's just been fined $500,000, right? Because that's what was the outcome of the thing. And some people might say it's really, really harsh, and it probably is. Like, but imagine if he's wrong. This is the point. Like, imagine if you were the parents of those children, and this guy's doing this and actively turning up and shouting in your face, dig up your son's grave, otherwise I don't believe you. There are consequences on both sides, is the point, basically.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I had someone call me an MI5 agent the other day, and I was just...
You're not doing it right if you've not been called that, mate.
I was just like, oh, really? And you know, I consider myself a little bit on the edge. I was like, you really are on the edge. But anyway, that's an aside. Thank you. I appreciate your input on that one, because, you know, we all come to things from different angles. I think the fundamental core of that is no one really knows. Nobody really, really knows, and that's where the investigation comes in. But we'll put that to one side. I think what would be nice to round off, if we may, brother, tell us a little bit, or quite a more, if you would like to, about this. Forgive me, I didn't write the title down, but your book on Manson and all this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, can we get a little bit?
Right. Yeah. Now is the only thing that's real, as it's called.
Yes, thank you.
It's a pretty hefty tome. It's pretty long. I've been fascinated with Manson for years. Just to
interrupt you, sorry, brother. Sorry to interrupt you. Did you watch Mindhunter on Netflix?
No, I've not seen it yet.
Oh, you should.
There's the episode with Manson in it, isn't it?
He's coming into it now, yeah. But overall, just a fantastic series. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're dead right, because I started it. Me and my mate watched programs together, basically, and I started it, and he wasn't so taken by the first episode, so I keep meaning to watch it on my own, and we got involved in.
Oh, it's great! It's really, really good. Yeah, highly recommend.
What I've heard, and I saw the bit with like the sort of Ed Kemper. How come they went to Manson as a real person? Because weren't all the other serial killers like they were?
No, they're all real
people.
Sorry, what was the question?
In Mindhunter, I thought that all the sort of characters that were serial killers, they were sort of based on people. So it was Ed Kemper, but he wasn't really Ed Kemper in it. How come in the Manson one they decided to make it actually Manson?
No, he is called Edward Kemper in it. I think they do use... Yeah, I think...
Oh, are they? Oh, that's me being wrong then.
Yeah, no, that's right. He is Ed Kemper, and I think they do use the real names for most of
do they? Oh, brilliant. It's even better then.
Oh, it's fantastic. Really, one of my favourites. Really good.
And what happens in the Manson one then?
He's only just come into it in season 2, so it's quite a funny episode actually. But the thing is, I don't retain it. I don't retain a great deal. I let it slide. But I don't think they've gone into too much detail with him yet. So I think they're setting the scene for season 3 to bring him into a bit more. Yeah.
I assume they're going to do him as like ultra sort of manipulative cult leader and that. Though.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it's kind of he asks the detective, can he have his sunglasses, which he gifts to him. He says, yeah, of course you can have them. And then he goes back and says, oh, he stole them off the detective to kind of get a bit of kudos. And all. So, you know, it's interesting stuff, fascinating stuff. Back to your book, brother. How did you kind of get into that? What was the inspiration?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. He's a fascinating character. And I've been sort of interested in him. Just the sort of mainstream story. The mainstream story is essentially that you know, he was in prison for the majority of his life, petty criminal, bit of pimping, bit of stealing cars, bit of moving them around the country and that sort of stuff. And he eventually sort of winds up coming out of prison in the 60s, and very, very soon he finds himself in the sort of the midst of the hippie explosion. You know, Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury. He's there, everything's kicking off, and he gets this harem of girls. Slowly, basically, he starts sort of like growing this what comes to be known as the family, which is a sort of quasi-religious cult. And they live on this ranch after moving through a series of houses, and they're sort of connected with the Beach Boys because Dennis Wilson's a friend of theirs, and they've sometimes stayed there. And they've got all these biker gangs hanging out around them and stuff like this. And you know, what's not to like? This sounds fascinating, doesn't it? And then eventually, basically, due to apparently his rejection from society and the music industry, and his belief that there was going to be an apocalyptic race war called Helter Skelter, in which the black people would fight against and kill the majority of the white people, and Manson's family would be out in the desert and wait until their number reached 144,000 and then come back and take over society, because black people wouldn't be able to run society in his view. This was the theory of Helter Skelter. And in order to start this, for some reason they decided to send his acolytes out and kill Sharon Tate and the people who were staying at Roman Polanski's house, and then the following night kill this completely random couple of Italian people called the LaBiancas. And then for some reason they just stopped. they just stopped. Like, although this was supposedly supposed to be like the catalyst for this massive race war that was going to sort of envelop the entire world, and obviously this hadn't actually sort of happened, but for whatever reason they just stopped. Anyway, that's the mainstream story. And even that is really, really fascinating. You've got all these different sort of angles. You've got bikers, you've got drugs, you've got religious cults, you've got, like, you know, girls and sex and drugs and rock and roll, essentially. And I was always sort of fascinated with that. But the more you sort of get into it, the sort of mainstream book would be Helter Skelter, and then there's a load of others around that. That was written by Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecutor, and the guy, you know, who was the person that came up with the theory of Helter Skelter and figured out what the point was behind this sort of whole thing. And then we get into other books like The Family by Ed Sanders, no relation. And that starts talking about things like the process, church of final judgment, and the possibility that Manson was connected to this quasi-satanic or satanic cult that was an offshoot of Scientology, and perhaps there was a ritualistic aspect to his murders, or perhaps they were connected in some case to other murders. Then you get into reading things like I can't remember the bloody name, Dave McGowan's work, and the one about the son of Sam, which I think is it Time to Die or something like that? I can't remember what it's called. Anyway,
Son of Sam's in the series as well.
Yeah. Well, oh, is he?
Yeah, I think so, because you just sparked off a few memories there where Manson's talking to the detective, telling him what actually happened and all the rest of it, and Son of Sam. Yeah, he's definitely in this, Son of Sam. Yeah.
The book is called The Ultimate Evil. Now, right. What this basically suggests is that David Berkowitz, he only was involved in one of the murders, and the rest were done by several people, and one of them including a guy called Bill Mensa, who was apparently the murderer of Roy Radin, who was connected to Robert Evans and Laney Jacobs and various people who knew Charles Manson and Dennis Wilson and all of that. So via the Bill Mensa connection, this book, The Ultimate Evil, suggests that, first off, it suggests that the Son of Sam didn't act alone, that he actually was part of a group, including several of the Carr brothers that were involved in this, and they were basically shooting these people and filming it, and it was totally random. They were just killing these people to make snuff films, which was being sold on to people like Roy Radin, who was a film producer, and what's his name, Crispin, who was an art dealer. But essentially that was the premise of this book, and it's a very, very good book. It makes a very, very strong case. But one of the things that I don't agree with, it says that perhaps Manson was involved in this death squad, and that perhaps Tate was murdered as part of this ritual thing connected to the process, church of final judgment. Then you go even further and you look at the Mae Brussel stuff, and she's suggesting that perhaps he's involved in something called Operation Chaos, which is the sense that he was perhaps seeded there and allowed to sort of create this chaos in order to demonize the hippie movement and to just give the hippies and communal living and the anti-war movement and everything associated with that name. And then you go even further than that and you find William Scanlon Murphy and latterly Nicholas Schreck's explanation of William Scanlon Murphy's theory, which is the concept that it was a drug deal gone bad and it was vaguely connected to the mafia, and that basically really Manson wasn't anything to do with anything of the sort. He wasn't a cult leader. He didn't come with Helter Skelter. He wasn't really behind the crimes. He certainly didn't order it. And unfortunately, he became the scapegoat in order to protect the great and the good of Hollywood, specifically like the Polanskis and the Tates and stuff like that. Specifically because J. Sebring, who was one of the victims, and Wojtek Bukowski were both selling drugs, cocaine for J. Sebring, and Wojtek was trying to get into the market selling ecstasy, or MDA, which is like a sort of version of ecstasy.
Good stuff, MDA, good stuff. It's good stuff, MDA, good stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. And so that so there's there's essentially like 5 different theories, and what I wanted to do was figure out which one was real. And I thought the best way to do this is to try and create a timeline of events, a very, very detailed timeline of Manson's life, and try and put these books on top of it, if you know what I mean. And immediately you realise some of it's nonsense, some of it couldn't possibly have happened, because while he's supposed to be telling Paul Watkins that Helter Skelter's coming down, according to the prosecution, he was actually at the Mamas and Papas house in Hollywood over 6 hours away. So he couldn't possibly be doing it. When he's supposed to be telling people to go out to the house where Terry Melcher lives and kill everybody there because he hates Terry Melcher, well, we find out that that can't possibly be true, because after that, he spends time with Terry Melcher, and he knew that Terry Melcher had moved to Malibu, and he knew that Sharon Tate lived there, because he'd already met Sharon Tate at a party at Elvis's house a few months earlier, when Dennis Wilson introduced them. And so you can start to unpick it. And essentially, the prosecution's case, the Helter Skelter book, is totally nonsense. It's utterly, utterly nonsense. It was a grubby little drug murder. Manson wasn't a cult leader. All of the things that you've heard about Manson being a cult leader, being doing the crucifixion rituals and stuff like that, and forcing his followers to take LSD, that all came from a gentleman called Paul Watkins, and also Danny DiCarlo, who was also basically became state's witnesses in return for losing federal charges against themselves for gun running and stuff like that. And they were the ones who basically came up with this concept of this cult and Helter Skelter and being obsessed with the Beatles. And they used the idea of this bloke called Krishna Venter. Krishna Venter was a real cult leader from Box Canyon, which is just near to where the Manson case took place. And like 30 years prior, he'd had a cult in which he thought he was Jesus and Satan, and he thought there was going to be a race war, and so he was going to take his followers out to the desert, and they were going to live there until they go to 144,000. And Paul Watkins basically nicked this and gave it to the prosecution and said, yeah, say Charlie did this.
Right.
And that's entirely what it was. All the Nazi stuff and like the anti-black material, there was some sort of Nazi magazines that were found at the ranch, and they were supposedly that means that he hates black people, which means Helter Skelter exists. And it transpires that these belong to the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club, that Danny DiCarlo, the person who brought them to the prosecution, do you see what I mean? He was the one that said, so this whole Helter Skelter thing was created by Danny DiCarlo and Paul Watkins. Basically, Helter Skelter was a club that Manson had set up. It was a gambling club that he'd set up in the desert. And that's why they brought the door to court that said Helter Skelter's coming down fast on it. Helter Skelter was the gambling club. We know it was a club because George Spahn, who owned the land, got fined for having an illegal gambling club called Helter Skelter on his property. So that's fairly cut and dry. Basically, what happened was Manson, he was kind of in with certain elements of the mafia through his prison time. Various people, and Frank Costello and Frankie Carbo, and to a lesser extent Mickey Cohen. And through Creepy Carpus and these other sort of people that he met in prison, he got to do auditions for Mickey Cohen, or basically went to a mafia-owned club by Mickey Cohen. This is why I went to San Francisco. And from there on, basically, he's selling drugs, and he's meeting very young girls who were having problems with their dads, who've all been kicked out of home. And he's a bit older, and he plays guitar, and he sings, and he's, you know, a bit sort of like cool looking and whatnot, and has incredible confidence. And all of a sudden, basically, this is it. So he's picking up all these girls. And prior to this, he's been a pimp at least twice. Once in Hollywood, a place called 3-Star Enterprises, and once in Texas. In fact, he was transporting girls from Texas to California. Now, the guy that he's working with in Hollywood is a bloke called Tony Cassini, who's mafia. And if he's moving girls down to Texas, he's doing that for somebody else, which would be organised crime, which at that time in America would be probably mafia. So basically, this is the point. He's got these sort of intimate connections to, he's not in the mafia or anything, but basically he gets these
affiliated.
Started selling drugs and stuff like that, selling drugs to people like, what's his bloody name? Dean Martin.
Okay.
Yeah.
They all know each other.
Elvis's house, like, gets a job immediately with Gary Stromberg at Universal Studios, working on films about Jesus and all sorts of stuff like this. He has these connections that you don't normally get, and it's because he's ingratiating himself, because he's the drug guy and he's the girl guy, and this basically. The whole Manson saga is a lot sort of simpler when you realise, oh, he was a pimp and a drug dealer. That's why he got into this situation and this situation and this situation and this situation.
Did Laurel Canyon come up?
A big pun?
Did Laurel Canyon come up in your research?
To an extent, because basically he claims that Frank Zappa stole some songs off of him, and he knocked about with like Jimi Hendrix's backing band. And Mama Cass was a friend of his. Like Susan Atkins, who's like the girl that allegedly cut the baby out of Sharon's belly but didn't, and like lied about it and stuff like this, was allegedly his #1 girl, but just wasn't. She really just wasn't. She used to go and stay at Mama Cass's when Charlie used to kick her off the ranch because she was a thieving little cow. And, you know, what sort of a cult's that, where you have to kick people off because they keep breaking the rules? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? He was also basically a very, very accomplished musician. And basically Brother Records, which is the record company owned by the Beach Boys, we're gonna do an album with him. Like 2 years earlier than the mainstream story says, Terry Melcher had already started working with Charles Manson, and they were going to do a documentary film and an accompanying album called Manson and the Family Jams, which is where the concept of the family comes from.
Right.
It was his backing band.
Okay.
Now, did they live a sort of communal life and have orgies and experiment with drugs on the weekend and stuff like that on this ranch? Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, absolutely. They did this. Like, was it a cult? No, it wasn't. No, it was quite a savvy bloke, basically taking advantage of a few people. There's cultic elements, but no, it's not a cult. It's a group of friends. The other argument is not well known and not sort of commonly liked, but it's absolutely true, is that basically Charlie helped these guys, particularly like people like Speaky and Ruth and Mary. These guys have been in a right mess without Charlie. Charlie like helped physically stop Susan from being like raped and murdered like a couple of times by getting into knife fights with people. Yeah, was he a good guy, Charlie? No. Did he order those murders? No, he didn't. What happened with the murders? What happened with the murders is all very silly. Tex Watson, who's a drug dealer and a little shit that sort of like knocks around, like trying to rip off other people. He's probably a rent boy. The first time we bumped into him, he was living with Dennis Wilson, and he was there apparently for his drugs, but the suggestion is that basically he was a rent boy for Dennis Wilson as well. Manson won a card game against Dennis Wilson at Elvis's house. And so Dennis, who was lonely at the time, got divorced, said, Manson, come and live with me and we'll do this album together. And that's it. He didn't bustle his way in there at all. In fact, at one point, basically, Dennis was going to go and live on the ranch because essentially him and Charlie were lovers. Yeah, they were lovers. So what happened was Tex, much later, when he sort of pissed everybody off and gone away and gone back to dealing drugs in Hollywood, and he's not part of this cult. He's certainly not his #1 man. He's not even really, even when he's on the ranch, he's not staying at the ranch, he's staying at the edge of the ranch. And you have to give Charlie his pickup truck to be allowed to do that.
Well, they didn't speak to each other in jail. Sorry to interject, brother. Jamie Morgan King, a really good interview with Sean Atwood. He was locked up over there at the same time, and he said Charlie and Tex didn't speak to each other essentially. So yeah.
No, well, Tex was nobody. This is the point. Like, Tex got Charlie into the bother. It's all Tex's fault. It should have been the Tex. It should have been the Tex methamphetamine murders, not the Manson murders.
Right.
Basically, Tex was this crummy little drug dealer, right? And his girlfriend stole all his money. They'd been selling drugs and stuff like that for ages out of his wig shop called Lovelocks. And his girlfriend, Rosina, she told him, oh, I'm going to go and get an abortion because I'm pregnant. And she took all his money and sodded off. And she wasn't pregnant. That was it. It was just a trick. And so to get her back and to get him some money, what he did was he took her along to this drug deal with him. And he says, oh, God, I've left the money in the car, sorry. Took the weed and ran off out the back, leaving his ex-girlfriend there thinking, brilliant, I've scored all this massive amount of weed, and any comeback will go against her, and that'll serve her right for stealing my money. Anyway, the drug dealer, who's a bloke called Lots of Popper, goes, I'm not bloody doing this, what are you doing? Knows where Tex has been staying, which is the ranch, and phones up and basically says, there's someone from your ranch here who's causing trouble, right? He's stolen all this money off them. I'm going to kill this girl here, and I'm going to come to the ranch and kill all of you. I'm going to burn the fucking thing down, right? And so Charlie, basically, at this point, goes, what's going on? What's going on? Tex explains it to him, and he says, we need to go and sort it out. And obviously, basically, Tex is a coward, so he won't do it. Charlie, at this point, can't get anybody to go with him. Again, if you're a cult leader, why can't you get anybody to go and do your dirty work? Why do you need to go and do it? Long and short of it, he goes up to this, tries to to sort it out, and ends up shooting this drug dealer in the stomach, thinks he's killed him, and goes back to the ranch. At this point, they decided they need to get in with a load of bikers, or really seriously get in with these bikers, because they've just killed someone that they think might be a Black Panther, and they need a bit of protection. They've been getting sort of ingratiated with these bikers anyway, because they've got this car chopping business where they're stealing cars and taking the engines out, turning them into dune buggies, putting them back in different cars.
Yeah.
So they're doing that, and all these bikers are around the ranch. Because these bikers are pretty cool. Bobby Beausoleil, who's one of the lads that sort of knocks around, he's got his own little harem of girls that's going on, and he plays music with Manson. He's played music with Frank Zappa before. He's also signed to Brother Records, so they've got an album coming out. Terry Melcher's dead interested in him as well. He sells $1,000 worth of mescaline that he got off his friend Gary Hinman to these bikers. And he's thinking, I'm well in with these hard guys now, it's brilliant. They turn up the next day and say, that was crap, that mescaline was, we want our money back. And he's in a right pickle now, because he doesn't know what to do. And basically, they say, well, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill you. The person who specifically says we're going to kill you is Danny DiCarlo. Danny DiCarlo, the person who came up with the House theory, the key witness for prosecution, presses a gun into Bobby's hand and says, go and kill Gary, or get my money, or get my drugs. And if you don't, we're going to kill you. It's just as simple as that. She goes over there, and it all gets into a tussle. Basically, the gun goes off, and this is silly because Gary's his mate, and like they don't really want to rob him. They want to figure out something to do. So after the gun goes off, they go, oh, brilliant. Okay, what we'll do is we'll sell you cars. Fine, we'll sell you cars. Oh, it's all sorted. At that moment, unbeknownst to them, Mary's phoned up and gone, oh God, something's kicking off. She doesn't know what's gone off with Bobby and all this. So she just thinks they're arguing over something. She doesn't know. Phones Charlie back at the ranch to say, a gun's just gone off. I don't know what happened. She's in a panic. Charlie whizzes down to Gary's house, knocks on the door. As soon as he answers, he smacks him in the face with a sword and cuts him across the face like this. Yeah, thinking that he's saved the day. And he soon realizes, Bobby's like, what are you doing, man? Like, it's all cool. Like, and Charlie's like, right, never mind, and just leaves. Now, Bobby's now in shock, bleeding heavily. They try and stitch him up, but he's annoyed. He's done everything that he needs to do. It's not his bloody problem in the first place. And now he's got a scar down his face and his ears hanging off. He wants to go to hospital. Fair enough. If he goes to hospital, the police will be involved. And at this point, Gary's dead angry. So he's saying, I don't care. I'll tell on Charlie. I don't give a shit. And Bobby panics and stabs him to death. That's it, because he's feeling the cycle gang, the police, and the enormity of this. Exactly. He gets arrested a couple of days later. Manson finds out about this, and he feels bad because it was his thing. You know, he owes Bobby a favor because basically he caused a problem by smacking Gary in the face. Tex robs lots of Popper. Charlie shoots lots of Popper in the stomach. Charlie now says, I owed Bobby a favor. You owed me a favor. I'll step out of the way. You owed Bobby a favor. It's nothing to do with me anymore. Bobby gets arrested. And so the only thing that they can think, basically, is we need to get some money together. Now, 2 days prior to this, Linda Kasabian, who again became the key prosecution witness, she turned up at the ranch having stolen $5,000 and several hundred tabs of LSD from her husband, from her ex-husband. Her and Tex immediately become a couple, and they go and see his friend Jay Sebring, and Wojtek Wachowski's there, and he gives them $1,000 worth of MDA. MDA turns out to be crap. It's so crap that the Canadian drug dealer, or the drug dealer that supplied it to Wojtek Wachowski, Billy Doyle, is taken to Mama Cass's house, tied to a tree and raped by Wojtek, as the rest of the crowd, which included Dennis Hopper, filmed it.
Summary justice. Jeez.
Well, this is the thing. But this is exactly the sort of grimy, shitty sort of like thing. This is why basically the whole Manson cult was so that grimy crap like that didn't come out, basically.
Yeah.
Anywho, so they go over to Sharon Tate's house, where it's Polanski's house, but because they know that the chap called Joel Rostow is about to drop off $20,000 worth of cocaine for Jay Sebring there. They also reckon they can rob Wojtek. So brilliant, they'll get everybody back. So they turn up to do this. They've been told earlier that Sharon Tate wasn't going to be there, that she was going to stay at her friend Sheila Wells's house. And at the last minute, she changes her mind. Now Sharon's there, so it's all gone tits up. And all of a sudden, there's too many people there because they didn't really think Gibby would be there either. And they've only got one gun, and they've got a couple of knives. And there's another lad there called Stephen Perrin. Now, interestingly, they walk straight in. You know, did like the idea is that they slit a screen and clambered in through the window. That wouldn't have been necessary because there were 2 open windows around the back of the house anyway. And the police report shows that they walked in. Why did they walk in? Because they were friends. Manson knew Sharon. They knew them. Like, it wasn't a random murder. This was Tex going to rob another drug dealer. It all goes wrong. Tex kills Sharon. Tex kills Jay, and Linda kills Stephen Perrin, or at least slashes him in the hand, and then Tex shoots him in the face. And they leave Wojtek and Gibby there, tied up, possibly stabbed, possibly think they're dead. But Tex is out of his mind on meth, as is Susan, which is totally forbidden by Charlie, by the way. So again, what sort of a cult leader who's allowing this? They go back to the ranch. Manson was in San Diego when all of this happened with a young Jewish girl called Stephanie Schramm, which again kind of goes against the idea that he's a Nazi. And he gets back and says, "What have you done? We've killed all these people, blah, blah, blah." It's like, are you mad? What have you done? So they get back in the car, they go back there to tidy the place up. And when they're there, they've realised that Abigail Folger and Wojtek Wachowski are still alive. And so Manson makes Tex kill them. Or, they are killed. Which means that Manson, although he didn't order the murders, was an accessory to 2 of them. It was nothing to do with the other ones, accessory after the fact, but it does mean that he was present for 2 murders, which is a new, different charge that we never explored.
Yeah.
Anyway, the following night, they go to the La Bianca's. Now, there's a lot of speculation about this, and nobody really knows what the crack is, because basically, La Bianca's appear to be connected to Jay Sebring, potentially via the drug market. Okay, it suggested that perhaps, Rosemary LaBianca was the LSD plug for Jay Sebring. She's certainly involved in some sort of like fraudulent mail operation with Joel Rastar, who's the cocaine dealer. She's also richer than Abigail Folger, who was the heir to the Sears, not Sears, to the Folger coffee company. So she's like, whoa, well minted. Bizarrely, this woman, Rosemary LaBianca, is incredibly rich as well. The other weird thing is that Lino LaBianca owes loads and loads of money to Frankie Carbo. You know, the mafia guy that Manson just happened to know in prison? And he's also vaguely connected, we think, or potentially to Nick Grillo, who was also in the mafia, who was the manager of the Beach Boys. And so the reason behind all of this isn't entirely clear why they were killed. But it looks like, again, they didn't expect to be killed, that they let them in and were tied up voluntarily, potentially as a fake burglary. And then what happened was, when they got there, they said, we know that you've got a load of money in your shop, your store. He was stealing money from this Safeway market that he worked at to pay for his gambling debts. And they knew that he was going to be there. And he also knew he was going to get sacked the following day. So they took him to the store to get this money. They also took Rosemary LaBianca out of the home. We know this because she got a dress on her and etc. There's various bits to prove this. Took her to her boutique. Now the safe was empty. What was in there, we don't know. Was it drugs? Was it money? Who can say? But that is the suggestion that basically there was some connection. Now there's many possibilities, but the two strongest possibilities is one, something that Manson said in an interview, which is basically, he said, I went there to get a little black book for Frankie Carbo. He said, did you know Lino LaBianca? And Manson said, didn't know Lino LaBianca, but I knew Frankie Carbo, and Lino knew Frankie. And or words to those effects. That's curious. That's very curious. And who knows? The other suggestion is that basically the main beneficiary of the almost $2 million in insurance payoff after Rosemary's death was given to Susan LaBarge, who was her estranged. Well, they weren't estranged, but they didn't get on. It was Rosemary's daughter from a previous marriage, and she was friends with Tex, and Tex's boyfriend and her boyfriend was a straight Satan who knew Tex and knew Manson. Joe Dorgan, his name was, from the car chopping thing that was going on. Straight Satans were the motorcycle gang, if you remember, that threatened Bobby Bosley. It's all connected, stuff like that. Tex, incidentally, used to live he used to live next door to Susan. Susan used to live in the house that was used in the credits for Melrose Place. So there's all sorts of like lovely.
Brother, we don't even have to buy the book now. You've given us the full-on load.
No, please do buy the book.
No, I shall put the link in the description box for sure, and it is on my to-do list, and I really appreciate that. And I'm very conscious it's Friday night, so I won't keep you much longer. But if I may, just one more point.
Of course.
This whole thing of societal brainwashing, where they've used the media for the narrative. You may not be familiar with it, so if not, we can revisit it another time. But have you ever read the article, The Soham Scapegoats, A Miscarriage of Justice, with regards to Ian?
Yes, I have.
Amazing. What did you make of it?
This is the one thing that I know about tonight. Brilliant.
Excellent. Yes. What did you make of it?
I think it makes a very, very compelling case.
It very much so does. I don't think that makes sense, does it? It does very much blew my mind, I must say, when I read it, because the words Ian Huntley instantly evoke, wrong and kill and all the rest of it. But then when you read the article, the fact of the major media coverage, and it's essential reading for anyone, I think, and it just goes to show how when the weight of the state is against you and they're using their full arsenal of tools, the media and all the rest of it, you are fucked, essentially.
This is the thing. I mean, you know what it reminded me of? The most poignant part of that was his explanation of how he killed the girls and how it makes no sense.
Did it? No, exactly.
Not a bit of it. I mean, the first thing is like, did he drown it? He never made. One of them died in the bathtub or something. Why didn't the other one run off?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very, very, poor, it's not what you would call a complete explanation, is it? But it reminded me of Yorkshire Ripper, right. There's two elements of the Yorkshire Ripper that are just like, that's bullshit. Like, he confessed, saying that God told him to do it, which is a very sort of mind control type thing as well. The way he was arrested, right? He was picked up in a car with a prostitute, right? And he got out of the car and he said, like, all right, before I get in the back of the police car, can I go around the back of this building and have a slash? And he went round, and apparently there he offloaded his hammer and his knife and something else, I forget exactly. Anyways, right? Later, the policeman twigs this and remembers it and goes back whilst he's being interviewed and finds these things. And it's like, that's dodgy. That's really, really dodgy. And then furthermore, there's another bit that was added to it, that if you watch any modern day documentary or program or book about the Yorkshire Ripper, they'll say, and he had knee pads stuffed into tights that he had underneath his things so that he could kneel over his victims and stab them and then masturbate, basically. And that was never mentioned until years later. If they'd have found something as significant as that, that would have been in all of the initial things. So what you've got with that is a very similar thing where it's almost like a backwards masking of facts onto it. And if you look at the way that it was connected, like Barry George and people like that, the evidence is massively flimsy. Have you read Dave McGowan's book?
The name popped up in the comments on one of your other interviews. I've got it written down on my. As I said, it popped up in the comments, so I'll
brilliant, check that out. Mate. It's really good, and that looks at a lot of different serial killer murders, and points out how desperately flimsy the evidence is in a lot of these cases. And the gist, I mean, it's basically like, it's the framing of these people. I mean, for what? Like, it could be for another number of reasons, and it's not again suggesting that all these people are necessarily like whiter than white, but there's various things. For example, with the sound thing, the idea is that basically these poor simpletons were framed in order to protect an international incident because it was protecting the US Marine. Okay, yeah. With the Yorkshire Ripper and some other people, it could well be like, for example, there's two different blood types as far as I can see in the Yorkshire Ripper case, which indicates at least two different people, or that they weren't all committed, the crimes weren't committed by the same person. There's also one thing which completely changes his MO halfway through and decides to try and cut one girl's head off with a piece of glass or something like that, and then never does that again. And it's just, there's something, the suggestion made is that when you've got a lot of unsolved cases, if you can bundle them onto other people, then yeah, it's more reassuring for the public, because you've not got these. They think, oh, that's fine. He's been caught now, and unbeknownst to him, basically, no, he's not. He's still down the road or whatever. Yeah. So that, it's a very interesting article. It's a very, very interesting article. I wouldn't doubt it. There's loads and loads. The Chicago child killer. All of these names escape from me. Black guy. There's something well cagey about him as well. And various other sort of serial killers, and it's not as similar to the Manson thing as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, when basically it's the idea of the creation of these people. I mean, don't get me wrong. You see, I'm not naive. I do appreciate that serial killers do exist, and like, the terrible, monstrous people, and like, but the concept of a serial killer can be used, or the concept of a killer can be used, as we've said, either to frame somebody for something they didn't do, or to tie up some loose ends, basically.
Yes, it's not a very comforting thought, I must say, but I'm glad you read that, because it's not many people have read it, and it just really blows it apart, because it was, in my mind, it was cemented, that kind of whole thing. And as I said, the name comes up and you think, oh yeah, and it's just, and this is what we're up against, brother. But we leave no stones unturned, and we look into everything. Well, I must say, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you this evening, Neil. I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure for me as well.
Yes, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And I'll put all the links in the description box for your book and all the other stuff. And was there anything you wanted to round off to before we wrap up?
Not really. Just if I've been a bit tired, I apologise. I've been filming a series
Oh,
that's
don't be
coming out
silly.
this week.
Oh, brilliant. What have we been doing?
It's for David Icke's new channel. It's a subscription thing that he's
Oh, I've heard about this. Is his son doing it or something?
yeah, Gareth and Jamie are doing it basically, and it's called Iconic, and it looks great from what I can see. Basically, it's like a sort of Netflix,
Oh, okay.
but like alternative Netflix. And there's
So
already
kind of next level Gaia then, is it? Gaia
yeah,
TV.
yeah, kind of.
Okay.
It's going to be the kinds of things that basically are slowly getting taken off YouTube, basically. That
Yeah.
sort of thing. And you can't find on the mainstream and stuff like that. So what he's offering is like a subscription channel. It works based just like Netflix, and you get access to loads and loads of stuff. And he's what they're hoping to do is get loads of content. So what I've done is I've recorded a 12-part series thus far. Each episode is about 45 minutes, perhaps a bit longer. And it's on mind control. So
phenomenal. That's amazing.
the first episode is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And it's on social media, a bit of Cambridge Analytica, and a bit of like sort of internet manipulation programs, stuff like that. Hopefully it's quite funny. I've tried to make it into like something. This is the point. What we're trying to do with this, or what I think is trying to do, is this isn't stuff that you could get on YouTube. This is stuff that's got a bit of production values. It's got a bit of like thought to it, bit of depth, a few gaps in there, something. So hopefully it'll be a bit entertaining. It's the sort of thing that you'll want to pay for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what's the point of doing something you can just find for free on YouTube?
Exactly.
But the idea as well is going to be that the first episodes of each series or whatever is going to be available for as long as it's available on YouTube.
Okay, like a teaser.
So the first one will be out there, and then if that sort of piques your interest and stuff like that, then have a look at that. But I've been doing that all week, and I'm absolutely dead on my feet, dude. Because
no, you were brilliant. I appreciate it, brother. No, I really do. Thank you, and I'm really looking forward to that. I have heard about it. I was watching a guy I follow, Sips Clips, was talking about it. He had some alternative ideas about it, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, no, I get everyone's point.
The funding, I think.
The People's Voice was a fucking shit show, and someone ran off with all the bloody money, and so I would totally get that. I totally get that. But the thing was with the People's Voice, we tried something, didn't work, and someone ran off with the bloody money. It was horrible, and I get it. What this is a subscription thing. It's totally above the board. You can see it. Now, the other point that I get is that some people will be saying that basically, the truth should be free. You shouldn't have to pay for this content and stuff like that. And it's like, you know what, right? Okay. The majority of stuff that's focused on, I'm going to be doing on there. If you can really be bothered, it's still going to be in my books. It's going to be in stuff like that. There's still available channels to get to everybody that's on the platform, right? Okay. You don't have to buy it. If you don't want it, you just don't buy it. It's fine. You just don't buy it. If you think that it's worth buying, buy it. It's really as simple as that.
That's it. It's a personal choice, isn't it? It's probably less.
But I would totally understand anybody's either of those arguments, right? Basically, the problem is that basically, although all this information should be free, if we want to get this as a platform where we're not reliant on YouTube and we're not reliant on things, and basically where people can be finding this information, I just say to this the information should be free. The information is free, everything that I've told you tonight, everything that I've written, every single book that I've written, and all this, right? Okay, it's all out there. It's not come from my head. It's just that, what I've done? I've taken the time to collect it. And you know what? If you want that collected information, it's going to cost you right? Okay. If you want to go out and do it yourself, go nuts, go absolutely nuts, right? Okay? That's sort of how service industry works, isn't it, basically? So this is the point. I think it'd be very good. I think it'd be really worth it. I'm hoping to get involved in. I'm hoping to do more on there. There'll be podcasts and stuff. I'm hoping to have another series, and a series on Manson, a series on Cambridge Analytica, and there's going to be loads of brilliant people on there, much more talented and better than me. And it's going to be really, really diverse. So if people are interested in that, go and check it out. It's Iconic Media.
Brilliant. They will do, I'm sure, because at the end of the day, was it less than a pack of cigarettes or,
I was talking specifically about the book there for the tenner. I think it's 100 quid for the year, right? But that's less than £10 a month.
Exactly.
And there's also discounts if you're already go through subscribe to Daly's website or something.
Okay.
And stuff like that. So yeah, if you're interested,
beautiful.
If you're not, I would totally understand. At some point, hey, someone's going to rip it and burn it onto the internet for free anyway. So if you can wait, like, you know, just wait. It's like the cinema, isn't it, really? Like, we had to wait until, like, you know, we had to wait 3 weeks to watch Joker because we're cheap. Like, me and my mate, we could have gone to the cinema to see it, but no. So this is the point. Like, if you don't want to pay for it, do the decent thing and just wait till it's free on the internet, like everybody else does.
Yeah, no, fair play, but I appreciate that, and that's a nice note to round it off on, actually. So again, I will thank you for taking the time to come and chat with us, brother. Have yourself a wonderful weekend, and I'm sure we'll catch up real soon.
I'd be delighted to come back anytime, mate.
Beautiful, thanks, Neil, much appreciated. All the best, brother. Take care.
Cheers.
Ta-ra, mate.